The scream cut through the desert silence like a knife, and Kane Porter reined in his horse so hard the animal reared back on its hind legs. He had been riding the lonely trail between White Oaks and Lincoln, New Mexico, thinking about nothing more pressing than whether he would make it to the cattle auction before sundown, when that terrible sound reached his ears. It was August 1882, and the heat pressed down on everything like a heavy blanket, making the air shimmer above the red earth. Kane wiped the sweat from his brow and listened, his heart pounding against his ribs. There it was again, weaker this time, coming from somewhere off the main path. He urged his horse forward, following the sound through the scrub brush and scattered juniper trees. What he found made his blood run cold. A small homestead sat alone in a clearing, barely more than a cabin with a lean-to stable. The door hung open, and another cry emerged from inside, raw and desperate. Kane dismounted quickly, his boots hitting the packed earth with a thud. He approached cautiously, not knowing what he might find, his hand instinctively moving to the revolver at his hip before he forced himself to relax. This was not the sound of violence. This was the sound of suffering. "Hello," he called out, his voice rough from the dusty trail. "Anyone here need help?" The response was a sob, then a weak voice barely audible. "Please. Someone, please." Kane stepped through the doorway, and his eyes took a moment to adjust to the dim interior. What he saw made him freeze. A young woman lay on a narrow bed against the far wall, her dark hair plastered to her pale face with sweat. The sheets beneath her were soaked with blood, so much blood that Kane felt his stomach turn. She looked up at him with eyes that held both terror and the faintest glimmer of hope. "My baby," she whispered. "The baby came, but something is wrong. I cannot stop the bleeding." Kane crossed the small room in 3 strides and knelt beside the bed. A tiny infant, barely moving, lay wrapped in a blanket beside her. The child was breathing, but the mother was losing too much blood. He had seen enough injuries on the range to know she did not have much time. "Where is your husband?" Kane asked, looking around the empty cabin. "Your family?" "Gone," she said, her voice cracking. "Thomas went to Silver City 3 days ago for supplies. He does not know. I thought I had more time before the baby came." Kane made a decision in that instant. "My name is Kane Porter. I am going to get you to help, you understand me? There is a midwife in White Oaks, Martha Patterson. She has saved more lives than I can count, but we have to go now." The woman's eyes widened. "I cannot ride. I cannot even stand." "You do not have to stand," Kane said firmly. "I am going to carry you." He looked at the infant, so small and fragile. "Both of you." He moved quickly, grabbing blankets from the bed and fashioning a makeshift sling that he could secure across his chest. He placed the baby inside it, praying the child would stay warm and safe against him. Then he turned to the woman. "This is going to hurt," he warned her, "but if we do not move, you will die here. Tell me your name." "Audrey," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Audrey Kendrick." "Well, Audrey Kendrick, you hold on to me and you do not let go. We have about 7 miles to cover, and I intend to get you there alive." He lifted her as gently as he could, but she still cried out in pain. Blood soaked into his shirt as he carried her outside. His horse, a sturdy roan named Ranger, stood waiting. Getting them both onto the horse was the hardest thing Kane had ever done. He mounted first, then reached down and somehow, through sheer determination and strength he did not know he possessed, pulled Audrey up in front of him. She sagged against his chest, barely conscious, the baby secure between them in the sling. "Stay with me," Kane said into her ear as he kicked Ranger into motion. "You hear me, Audrey? Stay with me." The ride to White Oaks was a nightmare. Kane pushed Ranger harder than he ever had, the horse's hooves thundering across the desert terrain. He kept one arm wrapped around Audrey, holding her steady, while the other hand gripped the reins. The baby made small, mewing sounds against his chest. Audrey drifted in and out of consciousness, her breathing shallow and rapid. Every time she went quiet, Kane spoke to her, sometimes shouting to keep her from slipping away entirely. "Tell me about your husband," he said desperately as they crested a rocky hill. "Tell me about Thomas." Audrey's lips moved. "Good man, kind. He wanted this baby so much, we tried for 3 years. He will have this baby," Kane promised, even though he had no right to make such a promise. "And he will have you. Just stay awake. Tell me more. How did you meet?" "Church social," Audrey murmured. "In Santa Fe, 5 years ago. He asked me to dance and I said yes even though I did not know him. My mother was scandalized." Kane smiled despite the situation. "A scandalous woman, I like that. What else? Tell me what you will do when you get better." "Plant a garden," she said, her voice so faint he had to strain to hear it. "Want roses, like my mother had in Missouri." "Roses in New Mexico," Kane said, encouraging her to keep talking. "That will be something. You will have to water them every day in this heat." "Will be worth it," Audrey said, and then she went limp in his arms. "No," Kane shouted, adjusting his hold on her. He could still feel her heart beating against his arm, faint but steady. "We are almost there, do you hear me? White Oaks is just ahead. Audrey, stay with me." The town came into view like a mirage, the scattered buildings shimmering in the afternoon heat. Kane rode straight down the main street, his horse lathered with sweat, drawing startled looks from everyone they passed. He did not stop to explain, heading directly for Martha Patterson's house on the edge of town. Martha was a widow who had served as midwife and healer for the community for more than 20 years. If anyone could save Audrey, it was her. Kane dismounted in front of Martha's house with Audrey still in his arms, the baby crying now against his chest. He kicked at the door with his boot. "Martha, Martha Patterson, I need you." The door flew open and Martha stood there, a small woman with iron-gray hair and sharp eyes that took in the situation immediately. "Bring her inside, quickly. The bedroom at the back." Kane carried Audrey through the neat parlor and into a small room that smelled of lavender and clean linen. He laid her on the bed as carefully as he could, then removed the sling with the baby. Martha took the infant from him without a word, examining the child with practiced hands. "Healthy lungs," Martha said, and indeed the baby was wailing now. "Probably hungry. When was the child born?" "I do not know exactly," Kane said. "I found them maybe an hour ago. She said the baby came, but she could not stop bleeding." Martha handed the baby back to Kane. "Hold the child. Keep her warm. I need to work on the mother." For the next hour, Kane sat in Martha's kitchen, the baby in his arms, listening to the sounds from the bedroom. Martha had shooed him out quickly once she began her work, but he could hear her calm voice issuing instructions to her daughter Sarah, who had appeared from somewhere to help. The baby, a girl, had quieted once Kane had figured out how to hold her properly, supporting her tiny head the way Martha had shown him. She stared up at him with dark eyes that seemed far too wise for someone so new to the world. "Your mama is a fighter," Kane told the infant softly. "She is going to pull through. She has to." The sun was setting when Martha finally emerged from the bedroom, wiping her hands on her apron. Kane stood quickly, nearly dislodging the baby, his heart in his throat. "She is alive," Martha said, and Kane felt his knees go weak with relief. "It was close, closer than I like, but I have stopped the bleeding and she is resting now. She will need time to recover, weeks probably, but she should make a full recovery." "Thank God," Kane said, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. "Can I see her?" Martha looked at him thoughtfully. "You can, but she is sleeping. Exhausted, poor thing. She must have been laboring alone for hours before you found her." She reached out and took the baby from him gently. "This little one needs feeding, I will see to it. You go sit with the mother if you like, but let her rest." Kane entered the bedroom quietly. Audrey lay still and pale against the white pillows, but there was color returning to her lips. Someone, probably Sarah, had cleaned her up and dressed her in a fresh nightgown. Her dark hair had been brushed and braided. She looked young, Kane realized. Probably not more than 23 or 24, close to his own age of 26. He sat in the chair beside the bed and simply watched her breathe, feeling a strange tightness in his chest. He had never seen this woman before today. She was a stranger, someone else's wife, and yet he felt connected to her in a way he could not explain. He had held her life in his hands during that desperate ride. He had felt her blood on his skin, heard her pain, witnessed her vulnerability. And somehow, in that hour of crisis, something had shifted inside him. He wanted to know everything about her. He wanted to hear her laugh. He wanted to see her hold her daughter and plant those roses she dreamed about. These were dangerous thoughts for a man who prided himself on staying unattached, on moving from ranch to ranch wherever the work took him. Kane had no home, no family, nothing tying him down. That was how he liked it, or at least, that was how he thought he liked it. Now, sitting in this quiet room watching a woman sleep, he wondered if perhaps he had been lying to himself all along. Audrey stirred, her eyelids fluttering. Kane leaned forward. "Easy," he said softly. "You are safe. You are at Martha Patterson's house in White Oaks. Your baby is fine." Her eyes opened fully and focused on him. For a moment she looked confused, then memory flooded back. "You saved my life," she said, her voice hoarse but stronger than before. "I remember. You rode through the desert with me." "You were very brave," Kane said. "How are you feeling?" "Like I was trampled by a herd of cattle," Audrey admitted, trying to smile. "But alive. Where is my baby?" "Martha is caring for her, feeding her. She is perfect, Audrey, beautiful." Tears welled in Audrey's eyes. "A girl, I have a daughter, you have a daughter," Kane confirmed. "And she has quite a set of lungs on her." Audrey laughed weakly, then winced. "Thomas, I need to send word to Thomas. He will be so worried when he returns and finds us gone." "I will ride out to your place tomorrow and leave a message," Kane promised. "And I can ride toward Silver City, see if I can intercept him on the road." "You have done so much already," Audrey said, looking at him with those expressive eyes. "I do not even know how to thank you. You are a stranger, and yet you saved my life and my daughter's life." "Why?" Kane was quiet for a moment. "Because it was the right thing to do," he said finally. "Because I heard you calling for help and I could not ride away. Because every life matters, and yours matters, and your daughter's matters." He paused. "And because I wanted to." Something passed between them in that moment, a connection that went deeper than words. Audrey reached out with a trembling hand and Kane took it, feeling the fragile bones beneath her soft skin. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you, Kane Porter." Martha entered then with the baby, breaking the spell. "This little miss wants her mama," she announced. "Think you can manage to nurse her, Audrey? You have lost a lot of blood, so you might be weak, but we need to try." Kane excused himself quickly, his face burning. He spent the night on Martha's front porch, refusing her offer of a proper bed. Sleep did not come easily. He kept thinking about Audrey's hand in his, her voice speaking his name. He thought about her husband Thomas, riding back from Silver City with no idea how close he had come to losing everything. Kane knew he should leave. He should ride out at first light, carry the news to Thomas, and then move on. That was what a smart man would do. That was what an unattached cowboy with no ties would do. But Kane was beginning to suspect he was not nearly as smart or unattached as he had believed. He rose before dawn and saddled Ranger, intending to make good on his promise to find Thomas. But before he could leave, Audrey called to him from inside the house. Martha had helped her to a chair by the window, and she held her daughter in her arms, the baby nursing contentedly. "You are leaving," Audrey said, and there was something in her voice that made Kane stop. "Just to find your husband," he said. "I promised I would bring him word." "Will you come back?" The question hung in the air between them. "After you find Thomas, will you come back to White Oaks?" Kane should have said no. He should have tipped his hat and ridden away and never looked back. Instead he said, "If you want me to, then yes, I will come back." Audrey's smile was like the sun breaking through storm clouds. "I want you to," she said softly. "I would like to thank you properly, when I am stronger. I would like you to meet my daughter when I am not half dead. I would like to know the man who saved my life." Kane nodded, not trusting himself to speak. He touched his hat brim and left before he could do something foolish like confess that he had not stopped thinking about her since the moment he found her. The ride to Audrey's homestead took less than an hour in the cool morning air. He found the cabin just as they had left it, the door still open, the bloody sheets still on the bed. Kane cleaned up as best he could, not wanting Thomas to walk into that scene. He burned the ruined bedding and straightened the small house. Then he wrote a note in careful letters and left it on the table, weighted down with a stone. "Your wife and daughter are safe in White Oaks with Martha Patterson. They are alive and well. Come quickly. A friend." He looked around the modest cabin, seeing signs of Audrey everywhere. A half-finished piece of embroidery on a chair. Books on a shelf, their spines worn from reading. A photograph of a man and woman on their wedding day, the woman unmistakably Audrey, young and radiant in a simple dress. Kane looked at the man beside her, Thomas Kendrick, seeing a good face, honest and kind. The kind of man who deserved a wife like Audrey, who deserved the happiness of a new daughter. Kane left the cabin and rode west, taking the road toward Silver City. He found Thomas Kendrick 2 hours later, driving a wagon loaded with supplies. The man's face went white when Kane explained what had happened, then red with anxiety and fear. Within minutes, they had abandoned the wagon by the side of the road and were riding double on Ranger back toward White Oaks, Thomas peppering Kane with desperate questions. "She is truly all right. You are not sparing me the truth." "She was very weak yesterday," Kane said honestly. "She lost a dangerous amount of blood, but Martha Patterson is the best healer in the territory. When I left this morning, Audrey was sitting up and nursing your daughter. She is going to recover, Thomas. You have my word." Thomas was silent for a moment, then his voice came thick with emotion. "I should have been there. I should never have left her alone." "The baby came early," Kane said. "There was no way you could have known, and if I had not been riding that trail when I was, well." He did not finish the sentence. They both knew how it would have ended. They reached White Oaks by late afternoon. Thomas practically fell off the horse in his haste to get to Martha's house. Kane followed more slowly, giving the family space for their reunion. But he could not help watching through the window as Thomas gathered Audrey carefully into his arms, both of them crying, the baby between them. It was a beautiful moment, and Kane felt like an intruder witnessing it. He was preparing to leave to find a boarding house or just ride out of town entirely when Martha came out to the porch. "Where do you think you are going?" she asked, her tone brooking no argument. "They have family business," Kane said. "I should go." "Audrey wants to see you," Martha said. "She insisted. Said she would not rest until she had spoken with you properly. So you get yourself back in there, Kane Porter, and let the girl thank you." Kane reluctantly returned to the house. Thomas stood when he entered, crossing the room in quick strides. For a moment Kane thought the man might hit him, but instead Thomas grabbed his hand and shook it vigorously, his eyes wet. "I owe you a debt I can never repay," Thomas said. "You saved my wife. You saved my daughter. Everything I have, everything I am, it is yours if you ever need it." "I do not need anything," Kane said, uncomfortable with the gratitude. "I am just glad I was there when they needed help." "What is her name?" Kane asked, nodding toward the baby. "Your daughter." Thomas looked at Audrey, who smiled. "We had not decided yet. We were waiting to meet her." "But I think I know now. Kane, what was your mother's name?" Kane blinked in surprise. "Catherine. Katie, she went by." "Then we will name her Catherine," Audrey said. "Katie, after the mother of the man who saved her life." Kane felt his throat tighten. His mother had died when he was 15, taken by fever, and he had not spoken her name aloud in years. Hearing it now, seeing this perfect tiny person who would carry that name forward, was almost more than he could bear. "That would be an honor," he managed to say. Thomas insisted Kane stay for dinner, and Kane found himself sitting at Martha's table, sharing a meal with the Kendricks and listening to them talk about their plans for the future. They had come to New Mexico from Missouri 2 years ago, hoping to make a new life in the territories. Thomas was a farmer at heart, trying to coax crops from the stubborn desert soil. It was hard work, often unrewarding, but they were determined to make it succeed. "We want to build something," Thomas said, his arm around Audrey's shoulders. "Something we can pass down to Katie and to any other children we might have. Something that matters." Kane found himself envying Thomas that sense of purpose, that rootedness. For the first time in his life, drifting from place to place did not seem like freedom. It seemed like running away. Over the next 2 weeks, Kane remained in White Oaks. He told himself it was because he wanted to make sure Audrey fully recovered, that he felt responsible for seeing the situation through. But the truth was more complicated. He found work at a nearby ranch, doing day labor, and spent his evenings at Martha's house where the Kendricks were staying until Audrey was strong enough to travel home. He helped Thomas retrieve the abandoned wagon from the Silver City Road. He played cards with Thomas and talked about cattle and horses and the best routes for driving herds to market. And he spent long hours talking with Audrey. They talked about everything. She told him about growing up in Missouri, the youngest of 5 children, always feeling like she had to prove herself. She told him about learning to read before any of her siblings, devouring every book she could find. She told him about meeting Thomas and knowing within a week that she would marry him. Kane told her about his own childhood in Texas, about his parents' small ranch that had failed during a drought, about his father's death shortly after his mother's, leaving Kane alone at 16. He told her about the years of wandering, never staying in one place long enough to call it home. "You want a home?" Audrey asked him one evening. They were sitting on Martha's porch, the baby sleeping in Audrey's arms, Thomas inside helping Martha with dishes. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. "I never thought I did," Kane admitted. "I thought I liked moving around, being free, but lately I am not so sure." "What changed?" Audrey looked at him, and Kane felt the weight of her gaze. "I think I did," he said quietly. "Or maybe I just finally admitted something to myself that I have been denying for a long time. I am tired, Audrey, tired of having nothing and no one, tired of not mattering to anyone." "You matter to us," Audrey said softly. "To me and Thomas and Katie, you will always matter to us." "That is not what I meant," Kane said, then stopped himself. He could not say what he meant. He could not tell this married woman, this mother, that he lay awake at night thinking about her, that he imagined what it would be like to be the one with his arm around her shoulders, to be the father of her child, to build a life with her. It was wrong and he knew it, but he could not seem to stop feeling it. Audrey was quiet for a long moment. "Kane," she said finally, her voice careful. "You know I am married. I love my husband. He is a good man, and I made vows to him before God." "I know," Kane said quickly. "I do know that, Audrey. I would never ask you to break those vows. I would never come between you and Thomas. He is a good man, the best kind of man. And you two are happy together." "We are," Audrey agreed. "But I also need you to know something, and I probably should not say it, but I think you deserve honesty. If things were different, if I had met you first before Thomas, if circumstances had been otherwise." She paused, looking down at her daughter. "I think I would have fallen in love with you, Kane Porter, and that terrifies me because I should not feel that way. I should not even be thinking it. But you saved my life, and in doing so, you became part of it, and I do not know how to unknow you now." Kane sat very still, her words washing over him. "What do we do?" he asked. "We do the right thing," Audrey said firmly. "You are going to leave White Oaks. You are going to ride away and build a life somewhere else. And Thomas and I are going to go back to our homestead and raise our daughter. And in time, this feeling, whatever this is, it will fade. It has to." "Does it?" Kane asked, but he knew she was right. The next morning, Kane packed his few belongings and prepared to leave. Thomas shook his hand warmly, oblivious to the undercurrents swirling around them. "You will always be welcome at our home," Thomas said. "Always, Kane. You are family now." Audrey said goodbye on Martha's porch, Katie in her arms. She looked healthier now, color back in her cheeks, strength returning to her limbs. She was beautiful, Kane thought. She had always been beautiful from that first moment in the cabin when he found her fighting for her life. "Be happy," Kane said to her. "Take care of that little girl. Plant your roses." "Be happy yourself," Audrey replied. "Find what you are looking for, Kane. Find home." Kane rode out of White Oaks as the sun climbed the eastern sky, and he did not look back. He told himself it was over, that chapter of his life closed. He had done a good deed, saved a life, and now it was time to move on. That was how it worked. That was how it had always worked. Except it did not work. Not this time. 3 weeks later, Kane was working at a ranch outside of Socorro when he got word that shook him to his core. A rider passing through mentioned news from White Oaks. Thomas Kendrick was dead, killed when his wagon overturned on the rocky trail back to his homestead. He had been alone, driving supplies home when it happened. His widow and infant daughter were destitute, the homestead likely to be claimed by the bank now that there was no man to work it. Kane did not think. He simply saddled Ranger and rode north, pushing hard, not stopping except to rest the horse. He covered the distance in a day and a half, arriving in White Oaks dust-covered and exhausted. He found Audrey at Martha's house again, her face drawn with grief, dark circles under her eyes. Katie was crying, and Audrey looked like she had not slept in days. When she saw Kane in the doorway, something broke inside her. She handed the baby to Martha and walked straight into Kane's arms, sobbing against his chest. He held her, feeling her shake with grief, his own heart breaking for her loss and for the guilt he felt. He had wished, in a dark corner of his mind, that he could have her. And now Thomas was gone, and the wish felt like a curse. "I am so sorry," he said into her hair. "Audrey, I am so sorry. He was a good man," she said between sobs. "He deserved better than this, better than dying alone on some God-forsaken trail." "He did," Kane agreed. "He was the best kind of man, and he loved you so much." They buried Thomas 3 days later in the White Oaks Cemetery, under a cottonwood tree. Half the town came to pay respects, testimony to the kind of man Thomas had been. Kane stood beside Audrey throughout the service, holding Katie while Audrey said her goodbyes to her husband. Afterward, when everyone had left, Audrey knelt by the fresh grave and spoke in a voice so quiet Kane could barely hear. "I will take care of her," she promised Thomas. "Our daughter. I will make sure she knows what a good father she would have had. I will make sure she knows your name and your kindness. I will not let her forget you." Kane waited until she was ready to leave, then walked her back to Martha's house. "What will you do now?" he asked gently. "The homestead." "I cannot keep it," Audrey said dully. "The bank will take it. I have no way to work the land myself, no way to make the payments. I will have to find work, maybe as a seamstress or a housekeeper, something I can do with Katie nearby." "No," Kane said, and the firmness in his voice surprised them both. "You will not be a housekeeper or a seamstress. You will not struggle to get by while your daughter goes without. I have money saved. Not a fortune, but enough. I will pay off your homestead. I will work the land. I will make sure you and Katie have what you need." Audrey stared at him. "Why would you do that? Kane, that is your future you would be giving away." "No," Kane said quietly. "That would be my future I would be building if you will let me. Kane." Audrey's voice was shaking. "Thomas has been dead less than a week. I cannot think about such things. I cannot even imagine." "I am not asking you to," Kane said quickly. "I am not asking for anything, Audrey. I am just asking to help. Let me help you. Let me do this one thing. There are no conditions, no expectations. You do not owe me anything, but let me take care of you and Katie." Audrey looked at him for a long moment, tears streaming down her face. "I do not deserve your kindness," she whispered. "Yes, you do," Kane said. "You deserve everything good in this world, and I intend to make sure you get it." So Kane Porter, the drifting cowboy who had spent his adult life avoiding commitment, moved into the small barn beside the Kendrick homestead and began working the land. He paid off the bank, using up most of his savings in the process, and set about trying to make the struggling farm profitable. He fixed the roof, repaired fences, and planted crops. He bought chickens and a milk cow. He worked from before dawn until after dark, exhausting himself so that he would not lie awake at night thinking about the woman sleeping in the cabin 30 yards away. Audrey kept the house and cared for Katie, slowly recovering from her physical ordeal and the shock of losing Thomas. She baked bread and made meals, and she always made sure there was a plate waiting for Kane when he came in from the fields. They did not speak much during those first months. The grief was too raw, too present. But gradually, as summer turned to fall and the desert began to cool, they found their rhythm. Kane would come in dusty and tired, and Audrey would have water heated for washing. They would eat dinner together, Katie between them in her basket, and they would talk about small things. The price of wheat, whether to plant alfalfa in the north field, the way Katie was starting to smile when she saw familiar faces. Safe topics, nothing that touched on the feelings that simmered beneath the surface. One evening in October, 6 months after Thomas's death, Audrey said something that changed everything. They were sitting on the porch, watching the sun set, as had become their habit. Katie was asleep inside, and the evening air was finally cool enough to be pleasant. "Kane, I need to tell you something," Audrey said, her hands folded in her lap. "And I need you to listen without interrupting." Kane nodded, his heart suddenly pounding. "When Thomas died, I thought my life was over," Audrey began. "I thought I would never be happy again, never feel anything but grief and fear. And for a long time, I did not feel anything else. But these past months, living here with you, working beside you, I have started to feel something different. I have started to feel alive again, and I have realized something important." She paused, gathering her courage. "I loved Thomas. I loved him truly, and I will always honor his memory. He gave me Katie, and he gave me 2 years of happiness. But Thomas is gone, and I am still here. And so are you. And I think, Kane Porter, that I am falling in love with you. I think I have been falling in love with you since the moment you rode into that cabin and refused to let me die." Kane could not breathe. "Audrey, you said to let you finish," she reminded him with a small smile. I know it is too soon. I know people will talk, will say I dishonor Thomas's memory by moving on. But I do not think Thomas would want me to be alone forever. I think he would want me to be happy. And you make me happy, Kane. You make me feel safe and cherished. You make me want to wake up in the morning. So I am asking you, even though it is bold and probably improper, what do you want? Because if you are only here out of duty, out of obligation, then tell me now. I will not hold you to anything. But if you are here because you want to be, because you feel even a fraction of what I feel, then I need to know. Kane stood up, pulling Audrey to her feet. I love you, he said, the words bursting out of him. I have loved you from that first day, even though I knew I should not. I have loved you through everything, through watching you with Thomas, through grieving him, through all of this. And I will keep loving you for as long as you will let me. So yes, Audrey Kendrick, I am here because I want to be. I am here because there is nowhere else in the world I would rather be than by your side. She kissed him then, standing on her toes to reach his lips, and Kane felt something inside him click into place. This was home. This woman, this land, this life they were building together. This was what he had been searching for all along without knowing it. They waited a full year after Thomas's death before getting married, respecting the mourning period and the memory of a good man. During that year, they worked the homestead together, building it into something sustainable and prosperous. Kane learned about farming, about coaxing life from difficult soil. Audrey learned about cattle and horses, about the business side of ranching. They made a good team, complementing each other's strengths. Katie grew from an infant into a toddler, taking her first steps, saying her first words. She called Kane Papa, and though it made him feel guilty at first, Audrey insisted it was right. You are her papa in every way that matters, she said firmly. You have earned that title. They married in September 1883, a small ceremony in the White Oaks Church with Martha Patterson as witness. Audrey wore a simple blue dress, and Kane wore his best clothes, his hat in his hands. When the preacher asked if anyone objected to the union, Kane half expected a voice to cry out, to accuse him of stealing another man's wife. But there was only silence, and then Audrey's hand in his, and the words that made them husband and wife. Their wedding night was tender and nervous, both of them aware that this was a new beginning. Kane had imagined this moment countless times, but the reality was better than any fantasy. Audrey in his arms, soft and willing, giving herself to him with complete trust. They learned each other slowly, carefully, building something entirely their own. And when it was over, when they lay tangled together in the darkness, Kane felt tears on his cheeks. What is wrong? Audrey asked, concerned. Nothing, Kane said, his voice thick. Everything is perfect. I just never thought I would have this. A wife, a home, a family. I thought I would always be alone. You are not alone, Audrey whispered, kissing his tears away. You will never be alone again, I promise you that. The years that followed were good ones. Not easy, never easy in a place as harsh as the New Mexico territory, but good. The homestead prospered under their joint efforts. They expanded their livestock, added more acreage, built a new barn and a larger house. Katie grew into a bright, curious child, and when she was 3, Audrey told Kane she was pregnant again. Are you sure? Kane asked, his hand on her still flat belly. Are you sure it is safe? After what happened with Katie, Martha says I am healthy, Audrey assured him. And this time I will not be alone. I will have the best midwife in New Mexico, and I will have you. I am not afraid, Kane. Their son was born in April 1886, a squalling, red-faced boy they named Thomas, after the man whose kindness and love had brought them all together. Katie was fascinated by her baby brother, insisting on helping with everything. And Kane found himself overwhelmed with love for this small person, this child who was truly his in blood as well as in heart. 2 years later, another daughter arrived, and they named her Catherine, after Kane's mother and also after Katie, completing a circle. Their family was growing, their home was prospering, and Kane sometimes had to pinch himself to believe it was all real. He and Audrey would sit on the porch in the evenings, as they had from the beginning, watching their children play in the yard. The roses Audrey had dreamed of during that terrible ride to White Oaks bloomed along the fence, bright red against the desert landscape, watered daily just as Kane had predicted they would need to be. "You ever think about that day?" Audrey asked him once when the children were in bed and they had a rare moment of quiet. "The day you found me." "Every day," Kane admitted. "How could I not? That was the day my life began." "Mine too," Audrey said softly. "Even though it was nearly the day it ended. Strange how that works." "Do you ever regret it?" Kane asked, voicing a fear he had carried for years. "Do you ever wish things had been different, that Thomas had lived, that you had never met me?" Audrey was quiet for a long moment, thinking. "I wish Thomas had lived," she said finally. "Not because I regret what we have, but because he deserved to live. He was a good man and he should have had a long life. But I cannot wish away what we have, Kane. I cannot regret loving you, and I do not think Thomas would want me to. I think he would be glad that Katie and I were taken care of. I think he would approve of you." "I hope so," Kane said. "I have tried to honor his memory, to be worthy of the life he left behind." "You have been more than worthy," Audrey said, taking his hand. "You have been everything. You saved my life, and then you gave me a reason to live it. You gave me love and safety and a home. You gave Katie a father and me a partner. You gave me more children, more joy than I ever thought possible. How could I regret any of that?" In 1890, when Katie was 8 years old and starting to ask questions about her birth father, Audrey and Kane sat her down and told her the whole story. They told her about Thomas Kendrick, the kind farmer who had loved her mother and had wanted her so badly. They told her about the difficult birth, about Kane finding them, about the desperate ride to White Oaks. They told her about Thomas's death and how Kane had stayed to help them. And they told her that she was loved by 2 fathers, both of whom would have done anything for her. Katie listened with wide eyes, then asked the question that made Audrey's breath catch. "Do you think my first papa would be sad that I call Kane Papa?" "No, sweetheart," Audrey said, pulling her daughter close. "I think your first papa would be grateful. I think he would be glad that you have someone who loves you as much as Kane does." "I love him too," Katie said simply. "And I am glad he found us, even if it is sad that my first papa died." "It is okay to be both," Kane told her. "Glad and sad at the same time. That is part of life, Katie girl. The hard and the happy all mixed together." As the children grew, the homestead became more than just a farm. It became a gathering place, a landmark. Other settlers came to Kane for advice on working the difficult desert soil. Audrey became known for her healing knowledge, learning from Martha Patterson and eventually taking over some of the midwifery duties when Martha grew too old to ride out to distant homesteads. The Porter place, as it came to be known, was a symbol of what could be built with hard work and determination and love. In 1895, Martha Patterson died peacefully in her sleep, and Kane and Audrey grieved the woman who had saved Audrey's life all those years ago. They buried her in the White Oaks Cemetery, not far from Thomas Kendrick's grave, and Audrey placed flowers on both graves every Sunday. "She brought us together," Audrey said, standing between the 2 graves. "Martha and Thomas both. If Martha had not saved my life, if Thomas had not been the kind of man who inspired loyalty, you might never have stayed. So I owe them both everything. Katie, now 13 and already showing signs of the beautiful woman she would become, put her arm around her mother. "We all do," she said quietly. "They are part of our story." Thomas, the boy, was 9 now, and little Catherine was 7. They were good children, happy and healthy, growing up in the New Mexico sunshine. Kane taught Thomas to ride and rope, while Audrey taught Catherine to read and sew. Katie helped with both the younger children, patient and kind, so much like her mother that it sometimes made Kane's heart ache. The turn of the century found them still on the homestead, still working the land, still deeply in love. Kane was 39 now, his face weathered by sun and wind, his hands calloused from work. Audrey was 36, with threads of silver in her dark hair and laugh lines around her eyes. They had built a good life, a full life, and they were not done yet. In 1901, Katie met a young man at a dance in White Oaks, a cowboy named Matthew who worked on one of the larger ranches. Kane recognized the look in his daughter's eyes, the way she lit up when Matthew asked her to dance. He recognized it because it was how Audrey had looked at him all those years ago. "She is too young," Kane said to Audrey that night, only half joking. "She cannot get married. She is still my little girl." "She is 19, Audrey reminded him gently. "The same age I was when I married Thomas." "Old enough to know her own heart." "Is he good enough for her?" Kane asked. "Is any man good enough for her? You will have to decide that," Audrey said with a smile. "But from what I saw, he seems like a decent young man, and Katie is smart. She would not choose poorly." Kane made it his business to get to know Matthew, to assess whether this young man was worthy of his daughter. He found, reluctantly, that Matthew was indeed a good man. Hardworking, honest, respectful. He treated Katie like she was precious, which she was. And when Matthew came to Kane to ask permission to marry Katie, Kane gave it, though his heart hurt at the thought of losing his daughter. They married in the spring of 1902, and Kane walked Katie down the aisle of the same church where he and Audrey had married. He handed her over to Matthew with tears in his eyes, and Audrey squeezed his hand as they sat down together to watch their daughter take her vows. "The first of 3, Audrey whispered to him. "We will have to do this 2 more times." "Do not remind me," Kane said, but he was smiling. Life continued its steady march forward. Thomas grew into a strong young man, serious and thoughtful, with a gift for working with horses. Catherine, they discovered, had inherited her mother's healing touch and her grandmother Katie's original spirit. She talked about becoming a doctor, a radical idea for a woman in those days, but Kane and Audrey encouraged her dreams. In 1908, when Kane was 47 and Audrey was 44, they received news that changed the landscape of their world. New Mexico was moving toward statehood. The wild, untamed territory they had built their life in was becoming civilized, regulated, part of the United States proper. It was both exciting and bittersweet. The Old West was dying, transformed into something new. "I am glad we had it," Kane said to Audrey one evening. They were sitting in their usual spot on the porch, older now but still together. The wild days, the freedom, even though it was hard, even though there was danger and uncertainty, I am glad we built our life when we did. "So am I," Audrey agreed, "but I am also glad for what is coming. For the stability, the law and order, for the opportunities our children will have that we never did. Catherine actually might become a doctor, Kane. Can you imagine?" "I can," Kane said. "I can imagine anything for our children. They are braver and smarter than we ever were." "They had good examples," Audrey said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "They had parents who loved each other, who worked hard, who showed them what was possible. You did that, Kane. You built this life for all of us." "We built it," Kane corrected. "You and me together. I could not have done any of it without you." In 1912, New Mexico became the 47th state. The Porter family celebrated with the rest of White Oaks, though the town was smaller now than it had been in the boom days. Many people had moved on, chasing new opportunities, but Kane and Audrey stayed. This was their home. This was where they belonged. Katie and Matthew had given them 3 grandchildren by then, 2 boys and a girl. Thomas had married a schoolteacher named Sarah, and they had 1 son. Catherine had indeed gone to medical school, one of the first women in New Mexico to do so, and was practicing medicine in Santa Fe. The homestead that had once seemed so precarious was now a prosperous ranch, over 300 acres, supporting cattle and horses and 3 generations of Porters. Kane and Audrey, both in their 50s now, began to slow down, letting Thomas and Sarah take over more of the day-to-day operations. They had earned their rest. They had built something lasting, something that would continue long after they were gone. On a warm evening in August 1915, 33 years after that desperate ride to White Oaks, Kane and Audrey sat on their porch watching the sunset. Their grandchildren were playing in the yard, shrieking with laughter. Inside the house, they could hear Thomas and Sarah preparing dinner. Katie and her family would be arriving tomorrow for a visit. Catherine was due to come home in a few weeks. The roses along the fence were in full bloom, filling the air with their sweet scent. "You remember what you told me?" Audrey asked Kane, her hand in his. "That first day when you found me in the cabin, I told you a lot of things," Kane said with a smile. "I was terrified you were going to die on me." "You told me to hold on," Audrey said. "You told me to stay with you, and I did. I held on to you, Kane Porter, and I never let go." "I am glad you did not," Kane said, bringing her hand to his lips. "I am glad you stayed with me. These have been the best years of my life, Audrey. Every single day with you has been a gift." "For me too," Audrey said softly. "You saved my life that day. But more than that, you gave me a life worth saving. You gave me love and family and purpose. You gave me everything." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the desert sky in brilliant colors. Around them, the homestead they had built together buzzed with life and love and the promise of tomorrow. And Kane Porter, the drifting cowboy who had once thought he would always be alone, looked at his wife and his family and his land, and knew that he had found exactly what he had been searching for. He had found home.